All right, it is 11 a.m. Eastern, Thursday morning, one of my favorite times of the week, because it is time for the Real Dope podcast. The show focused
Yay.
all on you, not on addicts. It is focused on those of us who love, support, and quite frankly, just have to deal with addicts. I'm hanging out here with my sister, Beth Brand.
Hello.
And remember, we are not doctors, we are not therapists, we are not experts in this field. We are just people, unfortunately, who have loved, supported, and like you, had to deal with addicts. And we wanted to do a show because so many people in this world are dealing with addiction. And we're recording this show right after the holidays. And we're going to talk about denial today, which is a great subject. We'll talk about that next week. But it really came to the forefront over the holidays, which tells you how far removed we are from it, that we sort of forget what to do when your addict's out of control, when it is, you try so hard to set the boundaries. You try so hard not to let them interfere with your lives. But there's something about the holidays that takes addiction to another level and really gets it to a point where, where your addict's way out of control. So, all right, let's go ahead, start the show.
Welcome to The Real Dope, a podcast for anyone walking alongside someone battling addiction, based on the powerful book, The Real Dope on Dealing with an Addict, by sisters Elizabeth Brand and Meridith Elliott Powell. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share authentic stories, and provide the honest guidance. Let's begin today's journey and turn survival into strength.
Yeah. So, Mary,
go ahead.
Let's just talk about first how why we decided to change the topic for today, because over the holidays we had a friend of ours who's about our age reach out, who has an elderly parent, and the elderly parent they discovered was being taken advantage of financially by a child who was suffering with addiction. But obviously the child is an adult too. But this child was stealing from an elderly parent, making the elderly parent confused and not knowing what to do. And so here's our friend who has separated from this sibling, who has made her boundaries, who gets it and knows what's going on. But she doesn't want her elderly parent, who is fighting her tooth and nail, not to get him, everything's all right. But her elderly parent, he was taking all the person's money and stuff. You and I faced this as well when our brother Ted, who we drew our boundaries, we didn't have anything to do with it, but we didn't have the boundary and didn't want to have the boundary where we were going to let our mother just not have any money to live on.
I think the important thing here is that it's and I was thinking about when we were going through the introduction, what do we mean by out of control? And what we mean by out of control, it's like addicts smell the weak. They go after the weak in the litter. And so in this instance, you have the elderly parent who's already kind of losing it, is reaching a point where they're frail and they don't really have all their faculties about them. And that's exactly what our brother did with our mother. It was easy to get her to give him money. It was easy to take money from her purse. It was easy to tell her that she'd lost her wallet and that she didn't realize she'd lost her wallet. It was easy to max her credit cards out. And so I think the very first thing that you need to do if you have an addict in your life is, if you have enough time, unfortunately this person didn't, but if you have enough time, think about beforehand what you can do to protect the weaker ones in the family. What can you do ahead of time to make sure that that they're not going to have access to funds, that they can't steal from them?
And this is where you really need to separate your thinking. And our friend was very good at this by this time this came along, of separating the thinking between the person you love and the addiction itself. Once the person suffering with addiction started stealing, she really labeled that person, her brother, an addict, and she wasn't looking at him like he was her brother anymore or a loved one. She was like, that is the addict, and I've got to get that addict out of my mother's life. Just like we did with Ted. And it's also a really good example of you and I had our boundaries, but that boundary didn't. This is a place we decided to get involved. We knew it wouldn't be pleasant. We knew it would be hard. We knew it's not what we felt like doing with our time in our life, but we wanted our mother safe. And Ted was gaslighting her. She was already kind of losing it because she was so upset about Teddy's situation, but he further kept telling her she was crazy and pushing her further into dementia.
Yeah, she couldn't find her purse all the time. He would steal it and he would take all her money and tell her that she lost it or she must have left it at the store. He would take her car and run all the gasoline out of it, and then she wouldn't know why she didn't have any gas in the car. And when when they're older and they're under that amount of stress, it's easy for them to basically lose their faculties. So I think it's a really important thing to know. We'd drawn a boundary and we didn't want anything to do with our brother. But at this point, we did interfere. And I think when your addict gets out of control like this, it is a good place to interfere. But understand, once you interfere, nobody, including the parent you're protecting or the person you're protecting or the addict, is going to be happy with you.
Yeah, and we weren't really expecting Teddy to act any differently, of course. I mean, as an addict, he was going to do what he was going to do and get angry. But we also didn't expect our mother to act any differently. Yeah. She wasn't like, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. She fought us tooth and nail. No, Teddy wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. Well, he was doing that. So luckily did you have power? We both had power of attorney, or at that point, or I think we gave it to you because she had said at one point, we had said to her, and luckily she was smart enough. We said she wanted all three of us, Ted, you, and me, to have power of attorney. And we said either Meridith has power of attorney or none of us, because we didn't want to make it like, oh, give it to the girls, but not Ted. Right. And then in the end, once Ted was gone, the two of us had it again. But at that point, we thought it was a smarter move just to give it to one, like just say one, and then tell Ted we're just giving it to one. You know, that was our strategy there. But so what did you do?
Yeah, I told her she could give it to me or to Ted.
Yeah, and I remember you and I deciding that it was better just to go with one than the two of us act like he was on the outs. Both this way you can make the argument both Ted and I were on the outs, which was fine with me. And then after he was gone, we went joint again when it didn't matter anymore. So tell everybody like what you did with the bank and that kind of thing. So you already had power of attorney.
Mm-hmm. So the very first thing that I did, I mean, I find that the banks are one of your first lines of defense, and they're a great first line of defense because they don't want to get in trouble for fraud. So they're highly focused or hypersensitive on it. And the very first thing that I did was I called the bank and I let them know that my mother was living with an active addict, and that he would steal her checks and steal her credit cards. Now, with power of attorney, I was a second on her accounts, and I was a second on her credit cards. So I immediately shut those down. I think he got one check through before we were able to shut those down and do that, before we were able to cancel her credit cards. He hadn't maxed very much on there, but they were really agreeable. I would suggest, if you have power of attorney, if you are a second on a checking account, go down to the bank and introduce yourself. Banks deal with this all the time. They have children and relatives stealing from older people constantly, and they're really, really open to it, and they're very aware and very helpful, and I'm very supportive. The other thing is, if the bank doesn't do it, let them know that you're letting them know that they were contacted, you're documenting it, you're dating it. And if any money is taken from the account, you have record that you warned them about this, because that's the other thing that might push them over the edge. Because if you did make them aware that this is happening and you date it and you document it, and a lot of money is taken from that account, you can go on the back end and you have more of a case if you end up suing them.
Meredith, did Teddy sign the check himself, or did he make Mother sign it?
He signed it.
So could you get him for fraud with that?
Yeah, we got it. He went to jail for fraud.
Did
because
he really?
I went down. I went down.
I knew
and
he went to jail. I didn't know what
for like 24 hours. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't a big deal, but at least it's 24 hours of peace, right? But yeah, I went down and testified that was not my mother's signature.
That's the other thing when we were talking to our friend. She was trying to do the fraud thing and get him her brother arrested, and I just started laughing. I said, in the beginning, you cannot imagine that jail is going to be the place where you're like, yeah, he's in jail for Christmas. This is great. We can have, we're all relaxed now, but that is really, really where you get. And she was having trouble. They wouldn't arrest him, but she was like, that was her goal before Christmas, to get him into jail. But yeah. So what did you do with that? So like, what happens with automatic pay stuff? Like when, your mother has automatic pay and that's on the checking account shut down. Did you have to take that over?
You just have to call that over. You just have to call all those people. The bank will contact everybody and let them know that it's been shut down for fraud. And you open up another checking account. The other thing you would do, I would ask that no checks be given for that checking account. If the person is living with the addict, just ask that no checks be given with that checking account. They can go down to the bank and get anything paid they need to get paid. I cannot tell you how much companies and financial institutions will work with you and will help you through this, because they are so used to it and so comfortable.
But that's a great tip that you said so you open a new account. So you already have a new account. You can transfer all the automatic pays right there. And then you make a request that no checks be printed for this account. I mean, that's really good information. I never even thought of that. That's really, really good information. Yeah.
And that way there's no checks or anything, there's no checks or anything floating around the house. The other thing that you need to do is, if your parent or person that you love has any investments, you need to call the investment people and let them know what is going on, and to let them know that the only person authorized to do anything with the accounts is either you or the parent. Yeah. And can even say, again,
just call us both.
Yeah, just call us both, because the parent could be under duress.
Yeah.
Or the loved one could be under duress having to do
especially
that.
Today's with computers, like they could Ted was living with Mother. He was a computer guy. He could have definitely gotten into her computer and taken money out of her, maybe he did, out of her investment accounts. Well, yeah. So get all that shut down and shut down the investment account on the computer, or make a note of that.
And even if the police don't do anything, calling them and documenting that you're doing things, the more you can leave a paper trail, the better off, you are, because maybe you don't get them on this offense, but you have enough offenses racked up, you can probably get something together.
Yeah, and just keep a diary. And just not just even of financial stuff, but anything that goes on, anytime that they do anything that's that shows that they have a drug issue or a fraud issue or whatever, keep a diary. That diary came in handy for me for many, many things. What about credit cards?
Yeah, credit cards, just shut them down. I mean, the best thing to do with credit cards is shut them down, is to go down to one credit card, and to eliminate the other credit cards, and make sure it's a credit card, not a debit card.
Yeah, because again, and that's another thing with the checking account, don't get a debit card on it. And but for the credit cards, all those credit cards are on the computer, like on the all your shopping accounts, or they're already there. So you need to just shut those down.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they're gonna, the other thing too is that you probably want to go over to this person's home and take out anything that's valuable, anything that means anything, any family heirloom or anything like that. You want to go ahead and get it out of the house because the addict's going to take it and the addict's going to sell it.
Yeah, Edward sold everything. I mean,
Yeah.
just every stupid thing we owned. I mean,
Yeah.
He sold all his parents' silver,
Yeah.
anything he could get his hands on. He stole, and or worse, he just pawned it, and then he didn't even get very much money from it, and then trying to get it out of the pawn shop, which never happened because he never had any money to do that.
Doug pawned everything we had, and we didn't have anything, but he pawned every single one of our wedding gifts. One year he even pawned our space heater, which was like all the heck we had to heat the to heat the house, and he pawned that. But if you have anything that, I mean, who really gives a flip about a space heater, right? But you may have something, a painting or something that's passed down through.
Yeah, we had a beautiful jade clock that Edward's mom had brought from Estonia and gave to us for our wedding. And I would love to have that today. I don't think it's worth anything, but I would love to have it. It was just a beautiful clock and just a memory of her being Estonian and then coming here in World War II, and a nice little history piece. And that's just gone.
Yeah. No, yeah, now it's all just history, and it's all just gone. I think the other thing too is that you either need to do something or you need to make peace with the fact that violence could be involved. I think like when you start to shut down their pipelines, when you take away their ability to steal the money, when you take away their ability to sell things, you need to realize that there could be violence involved, either to the individual that they're harassing and living with, or coming after you at some form of vengeance.
I believe Teddy would have hurt us.
Oh, I think he definitely would have.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't want him to know where I lived. But of course, Mother sold me out and told him.
Yeah. But I think that, and again, those are even things that you can do that the police can't do anything, but you can call them and let them know that you're worried about this, that you're thinking about this, those types of things. But just don't be surprised. Like if you always do Christmas at your house, it might be time to, just move it to another location, because you don't want to be predictable when your addict's way out of control.
That is so sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember the pressure of all that. I mean, just constant. I mean, no wonder we go enabling crazy and try to control everything, because it's bad. So what was Mother's reaction to your doing all this? Did she know you were doing it?
She was so confused at that point. I mean, I didn't really get involved until Teddy had been at it a while. I think had I gotten involved really a little bit earlier on, she might have been aggravated with me. Yeah. But she was so confused by that point. She didn't know whether she had any checks or any credit cards, or she didn't know, she didn't
remember
really know
she was going into dementia, and she had all those papers all over her. Yeah. And I would go over to her house and I'd clean up the papers, and then they'd just be all over again, which I didn't realize were signs of dementia, but it, it's obvious to me now.
Yeah. But I think that's the really good point that you're making, is that like, you need to realize that the person that you're helping probably doesn't want to be helped. And I mean, I don't mean that they do, but they don't want to admit that this addict is so out of control that they can't handle it. It's embarrassing to them. So, you're doing this because you're trying to protect a situation, not because anybody's going to be grateful, not because anybody's going to be appreciative, or that you're going to have that much impact. I mean, what you're trying to do is not get the money taken from the checking accounts, not get the money charged up on the credit cards. And you end up, that's why you really want to document everything. That's really like, if you don't call the bank and tell the bank who you are, even if you are in a power of attorney, all they see is two kids or two siblings or two whatever, just, I think when I worked at the bank, you sort of thought all kids were ne'er-do-wells, you know what I mean? Because it was just, it's usually when the ones that you were dealing with were there trying to get things from their parents, accounts. So you want to put on nice clothes you want to go down to the bank, you want to introduce yourself to the customer service rep and the branch manager and just say, this is, I happen to have worked there, so they knew me, but to basically say, look, I'm a power of attorney on my mother's accounts. My brother's
Take
an
your
active addict.
paperwork. Take your paperwork.
Yeah,
to show them.
My brother's an active addict. He's been trying to take money from my mother's, account and those types of things. Especially too, if the affected party has had a long time relationship with this financial institution or has quite a bit of money with them, the financial institution will let something go, will let a child come in and maybe get a few $1,000s because they think that's how they make the individual happy or whatever, so it was, the other, I would also say too, that if you don't have power of attorney, try to go more than a few times to try to get power of attorney, because what we did was we caught mother in a weakened state. She was the day we signed healthcare power of attorney and the day we signed power of attorney, she was really mad at you and I. And
she was mad at us. She was mad at us. Oh yeah, I had healthcare power of attorney, but she was definitely mad at us.
But we had tried to, we tried to do it a couple of times, and we caught her in a weak moment where she agreed to it. And then the day they showed up with the paper, she changed her mind and she was mad, but she signed those papers. Yeah. So just keep trying until you until you get that done. I think that's really, really important.
And even, just like you look at like Ted, you separate the boy you knew from the addict, that is, from the disease, like you're dealing with the disease. The same thing with our mother. She wasn't our mother. She was enabling. She was spinning and enabling, and she was in denial, and she just couldn't handle what was going on. So she was mad at us too, but even though they're mad at you then, once Ted was gone, and even if he'd never been gone, eventually she would have had to go into care. It made our lives easier. We had the money or some of the money to see to her care. Yeah. It wasn't totally on us. We had saved what we needed. So even though it was difficult in the moment, it was so much worth doing, not just for her own dignity of having her own money, but also because you and I were the ones who were going to be managing her in the years to come. Yeah. Yeah.
I also think that the other thing is that you need to realize is they are so confused by this point, is that especially if you're somebody who's healthy in this situation and you've removed yourself. I mean, we had removed ourselves at that point in our lives. We did not have an active addict regularly day in, day out in our lives. And if you have never lived in that situation, I mean, mother had, you got to remember, you isolate yourself. And then you have this addict living with you who is telling you at every single turn, either what they're going through is your fault or what you think isn't true. And so you add to that, you take to that, the grief and pressure that a mother was going through because of what she's experiencing, adding her age in there. Like she was so confused. She didn't know which end was up, because it had just been so much on her. So it's all the more reason to have power of attorney so that you can step in there and take control.
And it just wasn't the way she was raised or what she thought her life would be. It was so against everything that she thought. It was like it should have been a private. To her, everything was private. And for us to expose her by going to the bank and saying this child's an addict was just too much for her to take. But it had to be done because, it didn't have to be done, but it's better that it was done. And so I just think this was really valuable information. This is like nuts and bolts what we did. We got the power of attorney, and like you said, we tried more than once. If you have an active addict sibling or whatever, and you have a older parent or a vulnerable person now, if you can do it while they are still agreeable, that's great. I mean, as soon as you can get it done, you should get it done, just to get the power of attorney and power of healthcare attorney, so you have what you need to manage their life as if they fall into dementia or just confusion or just severe mental illness.
Yeah, I
Because
also think that I do think that it does have to be done, because the thing is that you think the addict is just stealing a couple of $1,000s out of a checking account. They will never stop. I mean, he would have mortgaged her home. He would have done everything. He would have sold her car. Like, there's no stopping them. And an addict can wipe out, like, our mother wasn't incredibly well-to-do, but if you even have a parent or a vulnerable person who is, they can wipe that money out so fast.
I mean, he wiped out several $100,000 in a couple years.
Yeah.
You know,
And
and she kept paying his fines and paying, like, because in her mind you pay your bills, and she did not separate herself from him.
Right.
You know.
And so what's the biggest thing you're taking away from today?
I'm just taking away the nuts and bolts of this, the goodness of, like, get your power of attorney as soon as you can, and don't give up on that, especially if you have a vulnerable parent. And I just really, like, when our friend called us, I was like, oh my gosh, we got to talk about this on the podcast, because this was the down and dirty of our lives. You know, this was the thing. This is how we lived. And even once we had separated ourselves, I just think it's also like a really good lesson on boundaries, that boundaries are not about demanding things from others. They're about setting things for yourself, you know? Yeah.
And I think, to me, I think the biggest thing is that it's, if there ever was a time that you have to let go of any kind of embarrassment or shame, and to act early, is to get as many people on your side as you can possibly get them.
And if you can do face-to-face
introducing,
if you can do face-to-face with the bank, which is so rare now,
the better. And I think to not
you keep freezing.
all the better. And the and to just not fool yourself. This isn't going this isn't going to stop.
No, it's not going to stop.
I know.
So
I'm wondering if we're having all this wind and bad weather up here. I wondered if it's starting to affect everything that's going on.
We're supposed to get it at 1. Okay.
So next week we're going to focus on
denial. We're going to go back to denial.
Next week we're going to focus on
denial. Did you hear me?
I guess I froze again.
You froze again. Denial, Meridith, denial.
All right, that's a good one to follow up this one, because that's the one thing you don't want to be in.
So we'll see you all right back here next week. Always remember, this is a show that is focused on you, people who love, support, and quite frankly have to deal with addicts. We'll see you next week.